I now welcome on Jason Berger. Jason is an entertainment lawyer from Philly, been practicing law since 2004. Jason, thanks so much for coming on today. And just why don't you start off just telling people what you do? What does it mean to be an entertainment lawyer?
Sure. Thanks, Dan. First off, appreciate you for asking me to be on. Always like to share my experiences. So listeners can, take that into consideration and appreciate on a number of levels. So, again, appreciate it. As an entertainment lawyer, my role kind of varies. At the crux of it is obviously making sure, from a legal perspective, that artists, producers, the various players within the music space are protected from a risk standpoint. The other piece that goes into it is a lot of contract work. As you know, a lot of the business and the relationships are governed by various kinds of agreements. So, we pride ourselves on kind of being specialists on the industry and how those kind of relationships are memorialized and documented. So a lot of what we do here is also document and contract heavy. I think in addition to that, and kind of what sets us apart from a lot of lawyers that operate in this space, is kind of the prospective nature of our advice. So we spend a lot of time, in particular, with the better clients, the more involved in the business, in a lot of stages of planning things out. And that could be anything from planning how to start a production company and growing that, to signing producers and working with different artists across different labels and publishing companies, and making sure that the business is set up. But it also goes towards, working with a recording artist, for example, on a release plan. So you want to put out a new piece of music, a product, and just the factors that go into planning that out the right way, ultimately releasing the music in the right way and marketing it so that you can be as successful with that as possible. Myself personally, I'm involved in a lot of different aspects of the business. So my law practice is one aspect. I also, with some partners, own a record label and a publishing company. I'm very heavily involved in the Recording Academy and sit on the board of governors and chair some committees here for the Philadelphia chapter of the Recording Academy. I also, really like to share my knowledge that I've gained over the years with whether it's people who want to become entertainment lawyers or operate somewhere in the music space, and that allows me to teach over at Drexel University. They have a great music industry program there. So for about 3/4 of the calendar year, I have a variety of classes that I teach over there. And, it all goes towards what I think is important in being visible and people starting to appreciate the brand that I'm building, first with myself and now with a team of lawyers over at Margolis Edelstein, which is the firm where I'm a partner, and I chair the firm's entertainment and new media practice group. And again, all those go into kind of us being experts in the area, and that means a lot more than just being able to do the paperwork. It means helping with relationships, helping our clients connect the dots with people that they need in their corner to do business and to do business the right way. And that's a big part of what we pride ourselves on, in addition to handling the kind of the run-of-the-mill legal work that comes with some of these roles in the business.
Just looking at like some of your own personal how you got started. You probably always liked music, but did you know you wanted to be a lawyer first, or did you really like music and entertainment, and then after the fact decide you were going to be a lawyer? And how did those two things come together?
Yeah, it's kind of funny how it ultimately materialized to where I am now. I always had an interest in music. I grew up and played in some bands, and when I realized I was a pretty terrible musician, I kind of transitioned and started to help some of my friends at the time who were pretty good at it. And that could be as easy as, opening some doors to some venues. I grew up in the Trenton, New Jersey area, and got some of my friends, the access and the ability to perform a show. And when I was in the latter years of college and finishing up and figuring out what I wanted to do, I kind of left that behind, because at that point I decided I would definitely wanted to continue my education after undergrad. And in determining what that next move was for me, law school was attractive because I wasn't really boxed in afterward. You can do a lot with a law degree. You can practice. You don't have to practice. But it's usually generally helpful for the resume in terms of doing something at a higher level and really whatever industry you're going to focus on. So I took that path. And during my time in law school, I really got interested in the trial work. I had some great experiences working with some different judges over in New Jersey. I went to Rutgers Camden, and really kind of got almost addicted to becoming a trial lawyer. So that's what I mean when I say that the music took a sideline. I was still a fan, still going to shows, but didn't really think that that'd be anything that I would mix in terms of my professional life. So that's really what I did. I graduated. I clerked for a judge for a year. Saw some really great lawyers, one of whom was had a pretty extensive trial in front of the judge that I clerked for after law school. And the judge that I worked for was very impressed with this lawyer, and ultimately I was helpful in getting me a job with him when I was done. And I just learned the ropes to litigate cases. We dealt mostly in the civil realm and business disputes. So, and then within a couple of years, I was handling my own trials, sitting second chair on some of the bigger trials. So I really learned a lot, not only about trial work, but a variety of different industries and how those industries do business, solve problems. And I think in hindsight, did I miss some years of networking and relationships by not jumping right into the music space? Sure. But at the same time, I also think I gained some insight into business in general, which allows me to kind of think outside of the box now in solving problems that have kind of historically been solved one way in the music business. So I think as much as I may have lost some time by not jumping right into the music stuff after law school, I also gained a lot of knowledge and experience that helps me solve problems in a less traditional way. Sometimes it works, and I'm the hero. Sometimes it doesn't. But the perspective, I think, is what's key for that. And I did that for about 7 years. Once when I got to that point, for a variety of reasons, the litigation practice became tedious to me. And I was never the type where I really needed the pat on the back. But even in cases where we were successful, a lot of times we would still have clients that were upset or disappointed because they had a big legal fee to pay at the end of the case. And it just wasn't fulfilling to me to put in all the time and the effort that these kinds of cases and this kind of practice required, and to just not have that good feeling at the end of the day that I accomplished something, So I thought maybe at that point I was still early enough in my career where I could switch gears, and I thought maybe music and entertainment was an area that I would like to explore. So I kind of inched there. I started out by just working on some transactions based on the kind of cases that came into the firm that I was still at, and working more with contracts and working on deals versus being in the courtroom. And once I expanded from that, I started to really learn the substantive issues that are involved in a variety of different industries, primarily focusing on music. So it was a lot of homework. I went to every CLE class possible. I read every book that I could. I, got a lot of different contracts for some really good lawyers at the time who were kind of walking me through this process. And, I would slowly but surely started to gain an understanding of the issues that are involved. And, that was kind of step one. Step two for me was really recognizing that the big jobs that are as a music lawyer or an entertainment lawyer that New York and LA have to offer weren't in Philadelphia. And by that point, I had started a family. I had a little girl in school. I really didn't want to uproot and move everything that we had here, and we really liked the area on top of all that. So I also knew that it would be a challenge and one that I was up for, to really build a practice, to get clients. Because when I was gonna really start out on this path, I knew that if I didn't have the clients and the work, it would be a losing effort, being in this market in particular.
Now, at this
point, I just engulfed myself, not to cut you off, in the industry and in the culture. And whether that was going to a show and maybe meeting a manager or getting involved in the recording academy, again, I just did everything that I could to shake that next hand or to have the opportunity to hand out business cards to the right people. And slowly but surely I would get some interest. Somebody would pick my brain about, a real small, simple agreement. And I started there to, I don't know how long it's been now, but 6-7 years later, where I'm doing things kind of at the highest level that the industry has to offer.
Absolutely, and obviously you're very involved now and know definitely the Philly music industry very well. And like at this point, when you do take on a client, is it just someone that is going to pay you, or do you only take on clients that you believe in when it comes to the music industry, whether you really like their music or their business or whatever? Like, do you pick and choose your clients and have a big say in that yourself?
Absolutely. We always have the discretion. There's really two sets of circumstances that we deal with here. We've been able to kind of grow with the caseload. So if somebody has a legal issue and it's worth for them spending a few bucks on and having it done the right way, we'll take that work on all day. And we've now grown with the volume as that volume has increased over the last couple of years by hiring additional staff and paralegals and making sure that we could always keep up with that kind of workflow. So that's the client that perhaps I don't have a previous relationship with, someone who may have been referred to us, or someone who one of my associates may know and brings that in. And that's usually just we perform the service for a fee. Now, there's certain other clients that I take a bigger, I don't want to say stake in, because it doesn't always track the time versus what I'm paid for this, but it's more of an investment. So there's clients that if we review the music and see everything they have going on and their social media presence and it all lines up, and we think that this could be a year or two from now with the right advice and the right help, a really big client of ours, we may invest more time in that. That's not necessarily going to show up on a bill, kind of just to buy into the longer term nature and the upside of the relationship, And that's where we may get into some of the more planning meetings, the more perspective advice, utilizing our resources and our Rolodex to help the artist or the songwriter or the producer connect the dots with maybe a publisher or maybe a record label, things like that. But that usually comes with, like I said, the non-traditional, because there's only so much time and capacity for us to do that stuff just because the bread and butter and is the billable legal work,
Yeah. Now, what are, like, when you are working for a client, just in general, what are some of the biggest issues that you see that you work with that artists go through as far as legal issues?
I think protecting themselves from risk, is a big one. We like to make sure before things really start rocking and rolling, pun intended, right, that they're set up to capture, not only to avoid risk, and a lot of times we'll do that by having them, their services furnished through a company, like an LLC, and we'll set them up with that. But a big part of this is understanding all the revenue streams that are available when you do perform services in a certain role, and making sure that you're in a position to collect all that income, right? The royalty schemes are a little bit complicated. Where and how artists and producers are paid can be complicated if you don't understand that. So part of it is making sure that that's in place, but we also like to educate our clients to the extent possible. So I have a lot of clients that choose not to do that, and their bills are much higher because we're not really doing legal work. Registering a song, for example, with your performing rights organization is something that an artist can do, a producer can do. Now, I do have some clients that would rather spend their time on the creative side. So they're happy to pay a fee for us to do that. But a lot of what I pride ourselves on in our practice group here is also the education piece. So if a client, for example, is unfamiliar with that process, they may come into the office and we may walk them through it, and we may have to charge for some of that time. But the goal really through that meeting and what that fee would represent is an education piece. So to make sure that they understand the process and you don't need a law degree to do it, and they become familiar enough with that first time and that first meeting to be able to go ahead and do some of those things yourself without incurring a fee later down the road.
What are some of the biggest mistakes that you see, whether it's young recording artists or just that they're just starting out? What are some big mistakes that you often see?
I think an overriding mistake that I see regularly is just not understanding just the nature of business, and taking people kind of for granted and the relationships for granted, where an artist and a producer, for example, may have a great relationship. They may get along very well in the studio. They may cut some records. But if that artist doesn't appreciate that there's some business on those records that should be done before the record is released, a lot of times that's a mistake that could jeopardize that relationship and perhaps other relationships. So I think, again, that's why we're heavy towards educating our clients on top of it, because we don't expect the clients to be able to do everything, in particular the higher level legal issues, and to deal with that. But in order to at least be educated enough to spot those issues is what's important. And to be able to then come to us and say, hey, this is, a little complex for me, could you get involved? To make that determination is really the first step towards doing things the right way. So again, kind of recapping the business informality and the informality of this industry in general sometimes gets people in trouble and causes them to make errors along the way. But, really just, I guess, not appreciating how things are ordinarily done and what the industry custom and practices is kind of a no-no. So that's why I say we like to try to get our clients educated on how those things go so that they can be in a better position to do business the right way.
Definitely. And when it comes to record labels, I think record labels, like when there's a mainstream artist that has a disagreement with a record label, sometimes record labels as a whole get a bad rep. But is there always good and bad when it comes to record labels, or is there record labels out there that are all good and are all trying to help the artist?
I think that relationship. There's some positives and negatives in most of the relationships that I've been involved in on artists' behalf. It's difficult because there's definitely some common goals in that relationship, but there's also some conflicting ones, right? So I think the biggest goal and the things that I can help, in particular after the deal is done, is just help managing that relationship, and having strong ties to some of the folks that are at the higher level of those labels always helps. And you just kind of figure out how to get around those hiccups that sometimes the relationship, by its very nature, does cause.
In this changing industry, are record labels still as important? Or artists sometimes are out there trying to make a career on their own. Is that the right way to go about it?
I think, I can answer that in probably 20 different ways, but to kind of summarize it in a relatively short answer, it really depends, right? I think that at some point in every artist's career, they're going to need to affiliate in some way, shape, or how with one of the bigger record companies in order to get the staff and the resources and kind of the back-end help to take things to really the highest level. At what point is it critical for that to happen? I think that's really where the variables come in. And I like to give an analogy to, an artist who's starting out, for example. And I usually tell people there's really two ways to go about it. Just when the artist is starting to release great music and get a buzz and the things, the views and the followers that come with that, you really approach a fork in the road of how you can take your career. You could go the independent route, right? Because, and to go back to your specific question, there's a lot more tools available to the independent artist now than there ever was, right? Technology primarily is driving that side of the business. So now, like, I could go on and cut a record in the studio today and work with an online distributor and have that in stores, maybe early next week. And that's amazing, because artists before this wave really didn't have the ability to do that. So some would look at that and say, hey, the label really isn't necessary because I can put out my own music. The problem with looking at it that way is there's a lot more to continuing to grow a fan base and developing as an artist than just having your music in the marketplace, right? The marketing that goes into pushing a project and a record is critical. The dollars that's required to push a project the right way is critical. So when we're going back to kind of that fork in the road example, I think it really takes two things in order for an artist to, at that juncture, take a more independent route and to continue to build things on their own organically. And those two things are the right team members, right? People who really know what they're doing in this business, who have those relationships that it takes. So maybe you wouldn't have to rely so heavy on a major label and the resources and relationships that they have. And it also takes a budget. And that budget can vary depending on who the artist is, what the goal is for the next project, where they are in their career. But to just put music out anymore just doesn't work, regardless of how good it is. So if you're going to choose that independent route, I really suggest that you have a strong team, and that can consist of management, a great lawyer, a good accountant, a good road manager, or a booking agent to get some shows on the books, things like that. And if you have the budget to where you can help pay for some of the tools that are necessary after you release a project and ultimately sometimes create the project, then you can take things pretty far on a quote unquote independent basis. And you kind of ask yourself, well, what's the value in that, right? Sometimes the things that come with working with a major label aren't necessarily attractive to that artist who's starting out and starting to get a buzz for themselves. You do give up a lot within those relationships. Although, again, the other side of the coin could be argued in that you also get a lot, and you can fast track your career and really do things the right way with the backing of a record company. The other side of the coin is if you're approaching that fork in the road and there would be enough interest to make a decision, meaning should I go independent or should I work with some of these companies that may be approaching me or my team at this point, it really is boils down to the value of what that deal looks like. Right? So if you're at that fork in the road and you have a couple hot records out and a couple videos, and things are moving in the right direction, people are talking about you, you can go, if you have the interest, into a record company and get a pretty nice deal. Maybe tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands. But the real money, when you think of like a deal that's valued over $1 million, doesn't come without some track record of success. And that's the real reason why you may choose, with the right set of resources and the right team, to do things independent. Because if you put out, for example, even a full-length project independently and have some really good success with that, ultimately your next project you may go to a major record company because of, again, the resources that they have. But the value of that deal is going to drastically increase when you've already been through the process and you can show the label that there's a track record of success, And that's usually the reason why people start out at an independent level and do things themselves, is to really drive the value up for the artist, and to ultimately, when it's time to sign that deal and maybe cash out, then the value is much higher than it would have been if you jumped at the first deal that was offered to you.
Definitely a lot of good information that you're giving artists to consider when they're just trying to start out and figure all that out. Now, just really quick, I'm going to go back because you said you got into more of the law side because you weren't a good not as good of a musician, but I did see a picture on your Instagram of you DJing. So is that a career that's going to take off now as well?
Oh man, that was by necessity, and that's kind of what I went back to with some of the artists that were a little more all in on. Right? Is that in particular opportunity we got a chance to for one of my clients to perform at a pretty big music festival, pretty visible weekend down in New Orleans, and the fee with it wasn't enough to where it made sense to fly a DJ down and bring a bunch of staff. So again, that's just an example. We're all in with some of these artists, and I'm at least personally of the opinion that I'm willing to do whatever we have to do. Right. So in that instance, it was a practical issue first, but at the same time, going back to technology, it's amazing. I have zero experience with DJ or DJ equipment beyond a real rudimentary understanding of it. But we work with some great folks here in our studios, and this artist in particular works with a real talented engineer and producer. So they were able to really make it as easy for me as possible to where I'm just pushing buttons, But it was definitely cool, different experience for sure. And like I said, if that's what kind of the job requires to help move the ball forward for one of the artists that we're really invested in, then that's kind of what we do. It's a good example of that.
You really do what it takes. I definitely respect that. All right, Jason. Well, I really appreciate you coming on, obviously giving out a lot of good information for artists to consider. Jason Berger, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.